A warm welcome is extended to everyone as we take a virtual tour of the Cass River. The Cass River is an important part of Michigan's history. At one time, cork pine towered above the river, and the logging operations there inspired Henry Dodge to pen the poem "Those Lumbering Days of Old," which begins, "When fall winds blow and flakes of snow fall on the mountain pass, our thoughts will wander back once more along the river Cass, to logging camps on riverbanks and all the snow and cold, and shantymen who cut the pine in lumbering days of old." Today, the Cass River is just as important to Michigan and Saginaw Bay. In fact, it is critically important to the entire Great Lakes ecosystem. That is what we are here to talk about today. The waters of the Cass River contribute to the productivity of Saginaw Bay fisheries. On the other hand, the Saginaw River and Bay Area has been designated an area of concern due to the contaminated sediments, fish consumption advisories, degraded fisheries, and loss of significant recreational values, primarily from non-point sources discharges. A group of volunteers works with the Cass River Greenway to enhance recreational opportunities and the environmental well-being of the Cass River corridor. Their efforts are assisted by professional resources and municipal leaders. Bob Zeilinger of Cass River Greenway Committee shares the group's efforts in looking after the river and its watershed.
We began to speak with some of the community leaders along the river, and we found that they were overwhelmingly in favor of us working together to try to improve the river and the use of the river. From that, 3 goals came out for our organization. One was to encourage the development of recreational opportunities along the river and along its corridor. Secondly, was to encourage the preservation of wildlife habitat in critical natural lands, especially near the river. And then we thought, as long as we're going to be working on those 2 areas, we really felt was important from a long-term standpoint to work on improving water quality.
Both nature and people benefit from the ecosystem of the Cass River watershed. The watershed provides spawning habitat for fish and greatly contributes to abundant farmland. It also offers many recreational opportunities. Boaters can drop in a canoe, kayak, or small fishing boat at the public boat launch to enjoy a day on the beautiful river. Anglers can try their luck by casting a line for their favorite fish, and visitors can take a tranquil and scenic trip on a commercial boating tour.
And behind me you can see one of the new launches that we sponsored here in Frankenmuth. It was one of several that we put in place, and we now have what we call the Lower Cass River Water Trail and brochure documenting where the sites are and so forth.
The Cass River watershed covers about 580,000 acres, with 40% of the area covered by open space, which includes forests, wetlands, and grasslands, with 57% being agriculture and the remaining 3% being urban areas. The Cass River drains to the Saginaw River and eventually to Saginaw Bay. The nearly 8,700 square mile of the Saginaw Bay watershed is one of Michigan's most diverse areas and the state's largest watershed area that includes all or part of 22 counties. The watershed is a landform that carries water from rainfall and snowmelt from the upland area to one common low point. Much of the water soaks into the ground to nourish plant life and fill aquifers, but about 30 to 40% of the water runs off into the creeks and streams that make their way to the Cass River. Sarah McDonnell of U of M Flint explains the importance of natural lands.
Natural lands are areas that have little human impact, so forests, wetlands, rivers, and streams. Natural lands are good for communities to have, just like communities have gray infrastructure like roads, sewers, and things like that. We can think of natural lands as the green infrastructure, and they play a critical role in keeping water clean, like filtering water, providing wildlife habitat. Natural lands can be impacted from human activities such as construction, fertilizer and pesticide application, and that can impact the wildlife habitat and how humans interact with nature. Some of the solutions to that are creating buffers around those natural areas to make sure they're protected.
The Remedial Action Plan for the Saginaw Bay Area of Concern addresses many issues affecting the water quality of the watershed area and identifies actions needed to restore the water quality.
In the area of wildlife habitat and critical natural lands, we've sponsored, and again through U of M Flint, what we call a natural lands inventory and assessment process. That's where 6 townships were analyzed and parcels of land were looked at and evaluated, and documentation was developed to identify what are those lands that still are with us pretty much in an undisturbed state, and documented that for future use for land preservation activities.
Another feature of the watershed is the floodplain, a flat terrace higher than the stream adjacent to it. When the ground is saturated from rain, water runs over the soil surface to the floodplain, which absorbs the energy and slows the torrent of high water events. Afterward, fine silts and sediments settle to create a nutrient-rich environment that supports wetland plant species that help filter sediment and nutrients from the water. Stream bank erosion also is a natural process, but when accelerated, it can lead to increased sediment, stream channel instability, land loss, habitat loss, and other adverse effects. Jim Hergott, Executive Director of the Saginaw Bay Resource Conservation and Development, raises the question on what kind of impact sediment plumes have on the river's fish habitat.
As this sediment moves closer to the river itself, it carries all kinds of nutrients. Every river has to have sediment in it to be healthy. The questions become when we get too much sediment and it starts to impact fish habitat. For example, the sediment running off the road here, you'll be able to see a sediment plume, and we're at the front of the sediment plume before it goes into the Cass River. All of this sand material covers up the gravel that we like to have for fish spawning habitat.
Adding to the water quality issues of the area are the combined sewer overflows, sanitary sewer overflows, and industrial sources of pollutants. Russ Bobian of the Spicer Group directs our attention to one of the last big pollutants that we have to deal with, and that is stormwater that runs over hard surfaces and goes directly into the water stream.
When rain comes down from the sky, the first thing it does is starts hitting on the impervious areas, the parking lot, the rooftops, and such, and they pick up a lot of pollutants as they start running off of those hard surfaces, and that water goes directly into our lakes. It's not stopped and processed, it's not cleaned up by any means. One of the last big pollutant sources that we have in this country is stormwater at this point in time. Pollutants that are attached to those sediments, you're talking hydrocarbons, which are any types of the automotive fluids that are leaking out of your cars. That's why it's important, if you've got a leaky car, fix it. It's leaking into parking lots all over the place and creating those little rainbows in rivers that you see going into the catch basins in those parking lots. That goes right from that parking lot right to your river.
Natural forces are constantly reshaping the land around us. Soil erosion occurs when the Earth's surface is worn down by water and wind. Erosion breaks down rocks and land surfaces, and then these broken pieces are carried away by wind and rain to rivers.
Erosion is moving soil from one place to another, and we're trying to manage those impacts. Erosion is going to happen no matter whether we have a field like this, which I would call clean-tilled, whether we have in the background some wheat or what looks like grass in the background. Erosion still happens on those areas, just not as severely as areas that don't have any type of protection.
Sheet erosion through rain and shallow flows of water and rill erosion, when the shallow flows of surface water coalesce and increase in velocity, often leads to gully erosion. When formed, gullies reduce the productivity of farmland and produce sediment that may clog downstream water bodies. According to Jim, one solution to gully erosion from farmland is to create a grass waterway.
You'll notice that there's kind of a sheen on top of the soil here. This is all sediment that has moved into this area and will eventually plug everything up so that even this road tube won't work. Some of the things that we could do in a situation like this would be to have what we call a grassed waterway follow this water course up into the agricultural area and act as a filter to reduce some of the sediment that comes in and to also help keep the waterway itself stable so that every year we don't have to come back in and fix it.
Jim reminds us it's important to manage the impact of gullies and road stream erosion.
Not only does the sediment in here, by depositing out, it's a good thing. The thing we have to do then, though, is get that sediment back out of that public utility, the county drain or a road drain, because it will then eventually cause flooding, so it's kind of a catch-22 situation. We would much rather keep this sediment on the land that it started out on than bringing it down here. It's also more expensive to come in here and dig this material out than if we kept it on the field itself.
In 1990, local farmer Jim Kratz put in a switchgrass strip that runs a quarter-mile down on each end of his property, creating a buffer between the crop field and the drain, thus preventing any sediment from entering the stream, which would eventually end up in the river and Saginaw Bay. Dolores Dahm, Tuscola Conservation District Director, uses no-till soybeans to prevent erosion.
So our main one here on this farm is no-till soybeans. This has enabled me to continue farming, for him to come in for 4 days to get the cropping done, to put the corn in. So without no-till, it'd be a lot more labor-intensive.
The over-application of fertilizers and animal waste near the water's edge also can introduce excessive amounts of nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus into the river system. Animal waste contributes to increased bacteria levels in water. Sediment runoff from cropland and livestock also can contribute to soil loss and increased deposits in the water. Jerry Rail, livestock producer in the watershed, explains managing cattle access to the rivers and efforts to restore and preserve stream banks.
Standing on the White Creek bank here in Sanilac County, we put a creek crossing in about 2000, I believe it was, and before we had this, the cows just run up and down the bank and had the bank all eroded out. There was no waterway, so we put these creek crossings in and redug the ditch, filled the banks all in. It's held up pretty good so far. I've been real happy with it. One of the projects was putting the fencing in, and they put a nice 4-strand high tensile fence on both sides here to keep the cattle out. That's worked real well for me. I haven't had any trouble with that. So the biggest benefit was my ditch banks are nice and straight yet. They haven't all washed in, and the cattle are crossing in one spot instead of a half a mile worth of ditch that they're running through. One of the benefits is to not have the cattle manure in the water. They don't usually stand in the creek here very long with these stones here. They move right through when they're coming through, so that eliminates the manure in the water that everybody doesn't want.
The farm of HWR Farms offers a catch basin that catches rainwater and runoff as a solution. The basin allows the nutrients to be taken from the water and is finally filtered by planted grass, preventing an erosion problem and putting nutrients into the creeks.
We're looking at some agricultural livestock best management practices. And as you look over here, you'll see a catch basin that catches all the roof water that comes off of this facility, stores it right here so that it can settle out any nutrient sediments. You can see that the water is dirty. In previous times, all of this water shot through this whole area. There was no grass or anything here, causing erosion and directly ended up into the creek. Now we're holding all of that water here, settling out the nutrients, letting it filter through the grass, so we no longer have an erosion problem and we're no longer putting nutrients into the creeks and things.
At the father-son farm of Bill Brown Sr. and Bill Brown Jr., managing manure where cattle are confined presents different issues. Manure is stored until land application timing is right, both environmentally and economically. Manure is spread when it can be incorporated following application of a crop intended to use the nutrients held in the manure. The value of those nutrients allow landowners to reduce the amount of commercial fertilizer purchased to raise the crop and improves the soil structure. In addition, manure is not applied within certain distances, usually 50 feet or greater, to minimize the risk of manure running off and polluting surface water. The Michigan Agriculture Environmental Assurance Program is an innovative, proactive program that helps farms of all sizes and all commodities voluntarily prevent or minimize agricultural pollution risks. This comprehensive, voluntary, proactive program is designed to reduce farmers' legal and environmental risks through a three-phase process. 1. Education. 2. Farm-specific risk assessment. And 3. On-farm verification that ensures the farmer has implemented environmentally sound practices. The program's three systems, farmstead, cropping, and livestock, each examine aspects of the farm. After becoming MAEAP verified, a farm can display a MAEAP sign verifying that MAEAP partners recognize the farm is environmentally assured. Our tour would not be complete without addressing invasive species of the wetlands river, Phragmites. This perennial wetland grass grows up to 15 feet in height and is threatening the ecological health of wetlands because it crowds out native plants and animals, blocks shoreline views, and reduces access for swimming, fishing, and hunting. The dry plant material can be a fire hazard. For large areas with dense stands, prescribed burning after a herbicide treatment can provide control and ecological benefits. According to Mike Kelly, the Conservation Fund supports the Cass River Greenways project to restore the fish passage at Mill Pond Dam in Frankenmuth. He explains what this project entails.
Here in Frankenmuth, the Conservation Fund and our Saginaw Bay Watershed Initiative Network project has been involved in a number of projects, one of which has been the Cass River Greenways program and some of the boat launch facilities or canoe launch facilities that they've established here in town, as well as their water trail project. But one of the other projects, kind of one of the highlight projects that we've been involved in, has been the restoration of fish passage here at the Mill Pond Dam here in Frankenmuth. This dam will be converted to a fish passage, a fish ramp, which will then reconnect 73 miles of the Cass River. Some of the most important habitat in the entire Saginaw Bay watershed. As it stands right now, walleye, sturgeon, and other important species that come up the Cass River to spawn are impeded from moving upstream because of this dam. When the 73 miles of river are reconnected, they're going to be returned to historically important spawning grounds that have been inaccessible for more than 150 years.
Greg Alexander, Sanilac County Drain Commissioner, explains commissioners' roles and responsibilities in watershed management while offering solutions to identified issues.
The roles and responsibilities of Michigan's Drain Commissioners is first and foremost for the health and safety and the welfare of the residents. Of course, being in an agricultural area where the Cass River watershed is roughly 60% agricultural land, it's our role and responsibility to make sure that the best management practices are used and the soil erosion and sedimentation control measures are used as much as possible. Some of the best management practices used by the Drain Commissioners are J-hooks, channels, and riffle and pool setups. Of course, all water is designed to carry sediment with it, so what the cross veins and the weirs do is they redirect the flows to the center of the channel to keep erosion from getting worse.
Albert Jones of USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service summarizes federal assistance to local landowners.
The Natural Resources Conservation Service is one of the key USDA agencies available out there for landowners to get technical assistance from. In the process of assisting those landowners, we're able to utilize our entire toolbox of programs to help address resource concerns in the planning process, as well as then assisting landowners with financial assistance to help implement those various practices which have been identified to best address the resource needs on the farm. So again, landowners can seek out assistance from the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the local soil and water conservation districts throughout the Saginaw Bay watershed. And that assistance is available free of charge and is secured through tax dollars. And our programs are all voluntary, so if landowners see a need and want to come in, they should stop by the local USDA Service Center and let us know what their needs are.
The Cass River is a grand river made of cobble and pebble, befitting its name origin, a Greek word meaning rocky. To personally help preserve wildlife habitat and critical natural lands, improve its water quality, and develop recreation opportunities, contact any of the following individuals and organizations. We hope you enjoyed this virtual tour of the Cass River and have gained new appreciation for its ecological and economical value to the watershed area, the great state of Michigan, and to the nation. Be sure to visit the Cass River with family and friends and enjoy all its recreational uses. Good stewardship of the river will preserve it for generations to come.